Hi, my guest for this episode is Jo Knight, who many of you will know. She's been an independent consultant and a marketing professional for 30 years in this sector, which is about the same amount of time as me. We've probably tracked each other a little bit, Joe, haven't we, down the years?
Totally.
I mean, the focus on sustainability is something that's sort of taken you through that time, and you support a long list of clients at the moment talking about environmental and social value initiatives. You're the co-founder of the Sustainable Design Collective. You're also the sustainability manager for Women in Office Design. You're a non-executive director of FIRA. You're on the advisory committee of the Furniture Industry Sustainability Programme. I have to slow down when I say stuff like that. You're the chair of the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee of the Furniture Makers Company. You're the chair of the Communications Committee of the Furniture Makers Company, and you're the co-owner of a art gallery called Really Very Nice, which is obviously something outside of the industry. And you work with certain companies, which you may be allowed to mention. So does that cover it?
Yeah, I think it does. Oh, and I'm now, which I'm very proud of, has been appointed a fellow of the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment. So
The,
I know, I think that's one I'm very proud of. I think when I started this journey, I never thought that I'd get that level of recognition. So yeah, that was when I was awarded that earlier this year, I was like, really? That's awesome.
but these things don't entail letters after your name, do they? Otherwise, it'd be like alphabetic spaghetti, wouldn't it? So,
Well, the latter that I just mentioned does, so I feel super proud of that.
all right, okay, we better get it on. Although I do have three sets of letters after my name, but I don't use them.
Well, I'm also a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts as well, so I can
Yeah,
use
there you go.
well, yeah. So I could have a really huge business card.
Yeah, you very very important.
Oh, I wish. No, I think it's called volunteering.
Yeah. Well, you
But
know my rule on that, don't you? It's that never volunteer for anything. So,
I haven't learned that one yet, but I think particularly in the field of sustainability, I think it's important. I mean, Mark, you and I go back a long way, and I make the joke, and I'm afraid it's getting a bit old now, but I make the joke that when I started in the furniture industry, there was so much formaldehyde in the board that that's why I don't look my age because I've actually been pickled. But it's true. And I feel that there's so much our industry still needs to do and so much learning that it's important that we all work collaboratively to try and make our workplace a better place to work.
yeah. So I was obviously raised in that part of the industry as well. So, I love the smell of formaldehyde in the morning, whether it's good for me or not is another matter. Anyway,
Anyway, we're not here to talk about that, Mark, so let's get
no,
on
we're
that.
well, we're here to talk about something I don't think is really talked about enough, which is um, comfort with regard to one particular sense, which is touch, and by extension, I think other senses as well, because um, all of the things that we're talking about with regard to comfort as part of this series kind of overlap in many ways. And so we're just going to have a bit of a free ranging discussion of these issues as they are to do with touch. Um, and also, I think touch on the idea, the connection between well-being and sustainability, which I think is obviously a passion of yours. And I think it's a subject that people understand very well these days. But that also applies to the conversation I think we're going to have today. So I don't know if I have any questions. What are your thoughts on that? What
Yeah,
I've just said.
I think touch is often overlooked, and yet actually it's probably the most one of the most important senses. I mean, we think about sight and sound, but most people, and I do accept it's changed a little since COVID, um, but most people shake hands when they meet, certainly work-wise. And that is a form of communication, isn't it? Through touch. because you notice if someone shakes your hand very rigorously or if they grasp your hand really hard, that will have a different impression on you than someone, they coined the phrase the limp handshake. And yet, for some reason, we focus on ergonomics, we focus on various different aspects of how we're treating our bodies within the workplace, but we don't consider some of those other sensory experiences too. And they're really important. I know we briefly touched on smell, but I think that's a whole different podcast. But I think touch is important. I know, I suppose I give an example of, I still don't like going to the theatre. And one of the reasons I don't like it is I have memories as a child being dragged along to various, I grant you it's partly because it was sort of various Shakespeare plays and things, which as a young child I found tremendously boring, which I'm sure shows as ignorance on my part. But it was primarily because when I sat in the chair, often because being a young girl, you were in your posh frock to go to the theatre. And so you wouldn't have anything, your skin would be exposed on the back of your legs. And you'd sit in these chairs that were this really horribly prickly velvet type fabric. And so you felt uncomfortable the whole time. And so that overwhelming experience and memory of going to the theatre was being uncomfortable. And that was simply because of, it wouldn't have been because the chair was badly designed in terms of how it was supporting my body necessarily. It was that feeling of touch.
With the law, is that the material? Because I suppose if you're wearing trousers, you wouldn't connect with it, would you? Whereas if you're wearing a skirt, you do.
And particularly as a girl, I would have been socks, and so it would have been open skin. I was, skin sitting on this sort of velvety velour type fabric. I think it was crushed velvet, actually.
It might be, yeah. Maybe where you grew up.
Horsehair poking through or whatever.
Well, I do remember they weren't massively comfortable, were they? I do remember that.
And so, okay, I'm giving an extreme example, but the fact that X number of years, and we won't mention quite how many years later, that's still in my mind and a memory of that experience shows you how important the experience of touch is in our recollection even of the environment in which you've been in.
It's in a workplace setting. I remember, being encouraged by manufacturers to touch veneer and compare it to an MFC, and they do feel different, don't they? That's
even veneer feels very different. It feels like a real. I mean, I know it is a real piece of wood, albeit a very thin piece of wood. But we enjoy textures from nature, don't we? Most people do, because it gives that connection back to. Well, it's different sensory experiences, isn't it? And it reminds you of things that excite you perhaps within the real world, which you're not experiencing typically within the office workplace. It tends to be very sterile, doesn't it? And certainly in the past was a box where you sat down and worked. And I still struggle with some of the ways we're designing offices now, in that I don't think it's really taking into account the overall holistic experience that you have in that environment.
I mean, the haptic environment, people don't pay enough attention to that aspect of materials. Because people talk about materials a lot now, don't they? But maybe not that characteristic of them, is that?
I would say so. I think often the talk, maybe because I live in a bit of a bubble these days in terms of, everything sustainability wise, but people tend to talk about materials more for perhaps their impact on the environment than necessarily the person. And the person, it may be relating to their health. But certainly the experience that you get within a workplace is reflected by the different types of materials. It's no different where we're designing for neurodiversity. We're creating different environments to suit different people's needs. Well, the same must be true, surely, in terms of the materials that are used, that some people might enjoy the very sterile, clean environment, whereas others want a more back to nature, shall we say, type experience when they're, and like those different textures and touches that you could have from different materials.
Well, I know we've touched on this when we talked previously about this idea of touching the grass, which is, which has a sort of dual meaning from what I can tell. One, it's reconnecting with nature, but also it's about getting back to reality, isn't it? And the idea that, when you're online, you're not. You're in some parallel world. It's not reality, and touching the grass is, it, conveys that idea that you are back in the physical realm with other people, around you and whatever. That is something that we gets talked about in the office. Actually, we shouldn't just focus on the office. We'll focus on other environments as well. It's not just about that, but with the idea of biophilia, which people talk about an awful lot, but it's not just about, as I think you would say, about having plants in the office and images of landscapes and so on. There's more to it than that.
Well, absolutely. And it drives me crazy that most people use biophilia to mean plants, don't they? And of course, that's not what it means at all. It's really about connecting back to the natural world, isn't it? And it's not just about, as you say, a picture of a landscape or whatever it might be. It's creating those different environments and recognizing that we link to nature through so many different ways. It's also about sound, isn't it, in terms of an air movement. And air movement relates back to touch as well. The feeling that you get on your skin from air movement. And I do accept then that has to be careful, because some people like a breeze, some people don't like a breeze, so it's again, it's about providing for individual choices, isn't it, and creating a more individual experience than then simply one size fits all.
But I suppose when you're looking at choice of materials as well, when you look at things like flooring, I mean, just the choice of, because the sponsor of this is obviously Shaw, and they obviously are very big on this topic. But a hard floor, which I don't think they do they? I don't know. Anyway, so they that gives a space, whether it's in an office or a hotel or a school or whatever, a very different feel to carpet. And even the choice of carpet after that will change the entire feel of a space for people and make them have a different reaction to it.
Yes, because it's not just the color, is it? It's the sensation you get when you walk on it. It's the same way as, okay, if you're talking about the workplace environment, it's probably going to be floor tiles, isn't it? And it's not going to have a different pile like you get, you might have a thicker carpet pile in your bedroom. But why do you do that? Whereas you have something different in the hallway. It's again because people want different textures and different experiences according to how they're using that space.
The retail and hospitality space, they will also specify different flooring to deal with the footfall in a particular space, won't they? So in an entrance, you might have a different material to what you would have in the rest of the space because it takes such a beating.
Yeah, but it's a very thick pile carpet is harder to walk on, for example, whereas something very hard is hard to walk on, but there's a sweet spot in the middle, which actually makes it easier for underfoot comfort, but that's a separate subject altogether.
Well, I'm not sure it is it? I think, it's like, but again, it's, I know in some offices, I've seen them introduce things like grass, actual grass into
Really?
the office. Yeah, yeah. I've
Who's
seen
going
that.
to
And you
mow
just
the
think,
lawn then?
I think it's probably more about letting it get enough sunlight to keep growing, doesn't it? So you don't just end up with a patch of mud in the middle of the office and have to explain that. But I have seen it.
Plant
And
ones, isn't it?
yeah, and and if you've got dogs in the office, obviously there's another problem there as well. But
Yes.
if if you have grass in the office, though, for example, that would and allow people to walk on grass in the office. That's again getting that idea across, isn't there? About that feeling of being connected to something bigger.
Yes, and I suppose if you take it on a bigger picture, if you look at how we're reintroducing, this idea in cities of pocket parks, where we're introducing green spaces with what was a very concrete landscape, it shows how yes, there's lots of reasons why they're doing that, and it's not just for human comfort. It's, about climatic control as well. But it does show that we do ultimately want to connect back to the real world.
Yeah, because I think that's, in terms of the link between sustainability and well-being, which I think is now pretty well founded, that is, um, a chance to remind people, if you with the design of a space, of that link. That you're doing something with the choice of materials and the environment that reassures them about your approach to sustainability.
Absolutely. I suppose I'm going to get on my soapbox now. One of my
Good.
favorite topics, though, is that there is a danger, I think, at the moment that we quite rightly are carefully examining the environments in which we work and look to create spaces that make us feel, not only make us feel most comfortable, but are genuinely not doing us harm. But equally, we have this habit of ripping everything out and starting again. Whereas actually, in reality, why can't we look at things through a light touch? So, what could we do to truly enhance the environment without ripping everything out and starting again? Because that's where we do the real harm, is the level of waste that we're creating by doing that. And there is a danger of saying, oh, well, we've got to have a more sustainable environment. We've got to have more natural materials. We've got to have this. Well, if you're just ripping it all out and introducing these new natural materials that are fantastic and far more beneficial to the environment, but actually, you know what? You've created a huge pile of waste. You're not really helping the environment at all, quite the reverse. So I just think we have this habit as human beings of just throwing the baby out with the bathwater and starting all over again. And
Hey.
I think we have to just rein it back and be more mindful about what we're doing and understanding what we're doing more, um, and probably engaging people who are going to be using that space. What do they want from it? And getting more interactive feedback and to understand the overall user experience rather than simply going, oh yeah, they're like that. Nice bit of bark on the wall there. Sorry, I'm being
Yeah.
facetious, which I have
Yeah.
a lot to do.
But you need to make them aware of the fact that actually your choice of materials, be it flooring or in the furniture or whatever it might be, or even things like, I suppose, paint and other finishes as well, that there has been a lot of care taken either to buy something that's very durable, so has a long life, or is genuinely um, reusable in some way.
Yeah,
Because I think that some of the claims that I've seen for recyclability, we've spoken about this many times, are questionable at best. And whereas I think with circularity, you are developing a more sort of sophisticated approach to that subject.
absolutely. And circularity, we mustn't default to recycling. It's the lowest of the hierarchy. And we must start with reduce what we're doing. And then, if what we do have to buy, consider what we're buying carefully. And I almost think you do demolition planning before you even start. But you've got me on my favorite subject, so that's
Mm.
fine. But
No, that's fine.
it's about thinking about what's going to happen, because inevitably change is going to happen. And so you have to start planning for that change before you've even started it in the first place, if you see what I mean. So what will the future hold, and what will you do in the future to manage the future changes in the least impactful way for the planet?
Yeah.
And I
But do
guess
you, do you think?
there's such a rush. Time is always the enemy, isn't it? And we still have this problem where everything is plan, 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 plan. No decisions are actually made. And then when it actually comes to do it, it's like, oh, goodness me, we've run out of time. We're going to do it really quickly and not really think about all of these things after all.
In terms of what you create and what happens to it in the longer term?
Yeah. So that, and it's the same way with reuse. It takes time, doesn't it, to consider what, if you're going to reuse new old products within your new environment, that takes time to plan for. And how are you going to
Okay.
And so often it gets value engineered out because you think time is money and we haven't got time to do that.
Yeah. Um, come back to the issue of haptic comfort as well. I know something we discussed was a news item recently about car manufacturers returning to sort of or getting away from touchscreens and back to physical controls. I thought that was really interesting that they've taken that decision, because I see a lot of talk at the moment about the ways that we might interact with devices in the future, partly as a result of the development of AI, that we might actually get away from that physical connection with phones and computers and whatever other tools we use. But the idea of touch seems to be important for the way that we create our surroundings. It's not just, if you've got something on your lapel that, is a sort of intelligent device that does everything, which is, I think, what they're going to be talking about. That's not the same as connecting to the surroundings.
No, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because technology has very much used haptics for some time. You think about the gaming industry, for example. They create feedback from race. I don't use games that often, but racing cars, giving that sensation of movement, giving the vibrations, giving a sense of speed and so forth. And I think that's what they're talking about. And that from a safety point of view, it's, as I understand it, it's certainly been proven that if you don't rely on simply visual and audio feedback, but also look for vibrations or some other sensory experience, that will actually be a much safer environment. And I think equally things like switches, there is a satisfaction, isn't there? If you get you have to exert some pressure to make something work. It's interacting with you. And I think that's what they're talking about, isn't it? It's too easy to just simply sort of on-screen touching and so forth. You don't get that same sensory feedback as if you've got a vibration or some sort of device. I know in my car, for example, if you aren't sticking to the lane, it actually you feel it pulling on the steering wheel.
Yeah.
So there's a vibration through the steering wheel. Personally, I don't actually like that, but that it's been proven to be a far safer route than simply simply relying on visual or audio cues.
Right. Yeah, I don't like that either. I've driven in those cars as well, or it starts to judder slightly, doesn't it? I'm not, or the steering wheel does, not the whole car.
No.
I don't.
My car's even worse. If you don't pay attention to it, it goes, take control. And it's like, mind your own business.
But does it do it in an annoying American accent, or can you reprogram it to be David Attenborough or something?
It flashes up on screen, take control.
Oh, right, okay.
But it's interesting. I read that same article, but I also saw the point about security and saying this frictionless is actually quite harmful. Things like it's too easy, for example, in a banking environment, let's say, for employees to just press a button without really understanding the consequences. So needing that sort of additional feedback from something in order to make a positive decision, rather than just simply suddenly pressing a button saying, yeah, do that, and find that you deleted a whole bunch of files or whatever it might be. And I think that's the point. You need to interact with human beings in more ways than simply vision or touch. No, we're talking about touch, but vision and sound. And I think, if we think about it logically, we already do that, don't we? So like if you put your phone on silent, mine continues to vibrate when emails come in.
Right.
So it's alerting you in a different way.
Yeah.
And obviously in terms of physical disabilities and visual impairment, for example, or hearing impairment, then we already provide for that. So it's really just taking that whole concept a bit further, isn't it?
Yeah, but this is all about making people comfortable in their surroundings, isn't it? So that they engage with it in a meaningful way.
Well, I think it's not just about comfort, is it? It's also about safety. And a more in-depth experience, as I understand it, that if you've got more than just visual and audio feedback, you're more likely to absorb information that's being fed to you, if you like.
Yeah.
So it's also about training, it's about safety, and it's about user experience as a whole.
Yeah. So I think that's really what it comes down to, though, isn't it? It's and that's what people say they want, isn't it? Is a great experience, and
Yeah.
it's up to designers, I suppose, to create that experience for them.
And I'm not sure touch, coming back to where we started,
Mm.
is necessarily prioritized, and yet probably it's one of the most fundamental senses that we have. I mean, skin's the largest organ in the body, so surely we should be really recognizing that. And how do we ensure that we are providing for choice and comfort within the environments we're creating for people?
Yeah, but you see it, don't you, in the way that people, when you show them a product at an exhibition or in a showroom, they touch it, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, but whether it's flooring or furniture or whatever it might be, or a door handle, which is more important than people suppose. They will touch it, won't they, as a first reaction?
Absolutely. Well, it's human nature. I mean, it comes back to you were mentioning about the fact that I own a gallery, um, which is another story, but it's quite interesting when you're in that environment, and we sell a lot of ceramic sculptures, for example, and people want to pick them up and feel them. It depends on how much they cost, that whether you allow them to do that. But no, ours are not that expensive, I hasten to add. And so, but it's quite interesting that if someone's handed this item and they in their hands, they're far more likely to buy it.
Yeah, so you want them to pick the ceramics up, don't you?
Yeah.
But you don't want them touching the watercolors, do you?
No, no, that's never a good thing. But but you know what I'm saying? And it's like you say, when you're in Clerkenwell or wherever it might be, people will always touch things. And you actually have to put signs up, don't you, if you don't want them to do it. Do not touch, or ask
But
to
it, but in
touch.
actual fact, if you are a manufacturer of materials, you probably do want them to engage with it in some way, don't you? Um,
And it's a very natural choice. You know, you think about how many pens might be made with a smooth rubber end because people like that sensation more than just clear plastic, for example. You know, there's a lot of thought that goes into all of these different types of materials, but we don't necessarily translate that across the whole, particularly office or workplace experience.
and we should.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Well, I think that's a great place to stop, isn't it? It's always nice to stop on a yes, definitely, isn't it? So we've come to a conclusion.
Well, it's an interesting subject, and I would like to think this might cause some controversy, so we'll see.
Well, I'd hope not.
We'll see, whichever.
I'd rather hope we persuaded some people rather than sort of wound them up. So yeah, that would be good.
No, I'm quite sure some people will say, oh, well, we do already do this, which is great and good for you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Joan.
Thank you.